Welcome to the Big Gunner Podcast. Okay, so Giants mini camp is done. 3-day mini camp, not much contact, but we saw some things that we saw. We get, more and more of a look at Jackson Dart, and we see that the things that Brian Dable wants to see is coming around. A lot of reports, a lot of people's opinions think that Dart could be in sooner or later should the Giants struggle. We all don't want that. We want to see probably a perfect year where Russell Wilson's the quarterback the whole year because that means we've won. But again, Brian Dable's in a position to save his job, so he's going to do what he thinks he's going to do. And the biggest problem the Giants have had under his tenure has been the quarterback. Although it was great in year one, last couple of years were tough. So again, great no injuries coming out of that, and I think basically we're at a position right now where stay healthy, get to training camp. I believe we're going to be better in a lot of areas. We can get through that, in the upcoming shows and leading into the training camp. But today I'm going to talk about a little bit about as we go through these troubled years, the Giants at the Super Bowl have had 2 playoff appearances since the last Super Bowl appearance, which is in 2011. 1 win, 2 losses in the playoffs. Why the Giants? I go back to my obviously employees working with them and talking about the Mara family and how they embraced me. As you can embrace an assistant equipment manager. And I'll give you one little story of my experiences. I was there probably about a month through training camp. We're probably game 1 or 2 of the regular season. And Wellington Mara really came around, but not very often at the locker room, but he knew everybody. Like he would talk, he wouldn't get a conversation, but he would not back away from a conversation. But being a young assistant equipment manager, I wasn't anywhere going to go near him or talk to him. And then one day I'm walking through the locker room and he was looking for somebody, and he walked up into the room and I jumped up and he said, "Hey, Michael, do you know where so-and-so is?" And I went, "No, I haven't seen him." Okay, and walked by, and I was just shocked that I had never been introduced to, never knew, but he knew exactly my name and who I was. And to me, I always thought that was kind of a nice feeling when you're sitting there as a young equipment manager working your butt off, trying to do whatever you're told to do. And it was just kind of a nice, it made me feel like, wow, like the owner knows who I am. And I always thought that was kind of something that I felt, and there was a lot of loyalty. And one thing about the Giants were at that point, and I think they're pretty similar now. Ronnie Barnes has been the trainer now since '79. The Giants are loyal to their employees' help. I even think the team is loyal to the fan base. As crazy as it sounds, I know the fan base gets tough on them, but I think a lot of what they're trying to do is they do want to win for obviously the money, the family, and all that, but they do care about their fans. I've always thought that. And, I look at it, I look at this way that, when I got that job, I was a fan around 9 or 10 years old where I started taking a liking to them. The games were at the Yale Bowl. I could only watch the Giants with Fran Tarkington when they were on the road. We didn't have home games, needed to be sold out. And back then it was just, you didn't see many home games, but because of the road and the TV deals and all that stuff, you got to see them. And then, 1976 Giants Stadium was built, and I got to see my first game live. Craig Morton at quarterback. The Giants beat the expansion Seattle Seahawks, and it was just an awesome experience. I was right in the lower bowl around the 40-yard line and watching all the fans, being around a big game like that. It was the first time for me, other than Yankee Stadium for baseball and Shea Stadium for baseball. That was the first real big-time football game I was at, and the atmosphere would just brought me in. So from 76 on, you weren't moving me away from the Giants. Being the stadium was in the next town over. I grew up in Rutherford, and the stadium was built in East Rutherford. I just felt that local loyalty to the team. And then around 1979, 78, the Giants were, back then, sporting goods sales and there was no licensed goods deals. So you had the situation where my father, who was a sporting goods salesman, was trying to get his feet wet with all these different things, and he just decided he was going to walk in and try to figure out what he could provide for the Giants. So after meeting Ray Perkins and getting a couple of deals with Socks and Jocks and practice gear, and he ended up doing those block nameplates that you see with Taylor 56 and Sims. Those eye-catching nameplates were my father's idea, and we would sit in the upper tier at these games when we had season tickets after '76. Our family had them, and basically, look down, and my father said, I can't see the names of the jerseys. Who's who? And so he came up with those block letters, and the Giants took to it, and those were famous block letters that you see on the Rush jerseys now today. So all that being, and I got a chance to go in the locker room at 14 and 15, see the players. I love Brad Van Pelt. I love Brian Kelly. The Giant linebackers. I was always for defense. I still am to this day, more about defense and offense, even though the rule changes have kind of got me away from my thought process and trying to change the way I think about the game. I just looked at it like, wow, this was fun. And then I got lucky enough to be, when the New Jersey Generals came in, I got a job as a visiting team locker room attendant, and it forwarded me all into the Giants. So to me, it's love and loyalty. And the frustration that arises today is over. That these years that we're having right now, we went 15 years without a playoff spot, from 63 to 70 to 81. Or 18 years. We didn't sniff the playoffs. So this is probably as down a cycle since those times in the 70s when the Giants didn't touch anything that we are dealing with now. But at least we've had a playoff chance in 22. So my thought is, keep it positive going into this. I look at the Giants right now as we are the second lowest team total, 5.5 under 55, than anyone has out there. Cleveland's the only one that's lower than us. I think actually Tennessee is 5.5, and the juice is different. So, I'm looking at this right now where, we're really the only place to go but up. And I think it comes into the health. But my loyalty and love for this franchise is, I've kind of changed a little bit in baseball, rooted for the Marlins when I got here to South Florida in '92. Yankees were always my grandfather's team, and I kind of liked them through the times in the '90s, right before he passed, where we were watching games together, and it was I had that loyalty toward the Yankees. But it just, when I moved here, the Heat, I think I was loyal to the Knicks, obviously, growing up. And then when Pat Riley took the Knicks job, I loved it. Was happy because I was kind of, when the Knicks were out of it, I was always rooting for the Lakers back then in the 80s. And then kind of, loved the Showtime, loved the hair, I loved the GQ magazine of Pat Riley. And then all of a sudden, he comes to Miami, and now I had a chance to meet him and this and that. So I was kind of a Heat guy after that. But the Giants, nothing will ever take me away from the Giants. And that's the thing that, I always joke, I bleed blue. Named my late Mastiff in Las Vegas, named Blue. It's not going to change. So to me, this is a pivotal year. I believe Brian Dable's our guy. I'd like to see Joe Shane have success. I don't like overturning, front office people and coaches. That's been a new way of operating. I just always love having loyalty and keeping people around. When I hear the Mike Tomlin stories that Mike Tomlin's going to get fired and all that, it drives me crazy. You can't fire the guy, but everybody wants results, and he's only gotten the one Super Bowl ring, and they haven't gotten deep into the playoffs. But the guy doesn't have a losing season. It's like wait till a Steeler fan goes 3-14 and then sit there and see what they think then. It might be intolerable, but the Steelers were, people stepped all over the Steelers and long before they got Terry Bradshaw and Chuck Noll and the Steel Curtain and all that. So the Steelers weren't a prominent team at all. The Giants in the 50s were successful. Giants in the 60s won a little bit. Then we went through our 18-year drought. The Giants in the 80s were a perennial playoff team. After 81 and 84 when I was there, we won a game, and then 85 we won a game, 86 we win a title. 90 we win. Then we go through a little low. We get to the Super Bowl in 2000. Then we have some success. 7-11, unexpected success. It's not been consistent, but it's when we get deep in the playoffs. Being 5-0 in the NFC Championship games is a historical mark. We've never lost an NFC Championship game, which I think is a great stat, and 4-1 in Super Bowls. Not many teams have those kind of records. So to me, I just think that this is the pivotal year for Dable and his crew. We all know that. And I like to see it happen. I like to see us get off to a 2-2 start, real tough 4-game start. And I think if we do that, I think this team will be fine. I think we're going to be really good defensively, and I think if we keep our offensive line healthy and we play the way we were playing up until Andrew Thomas's injury last year, I think this team could be better than people think. So we're going to be talk more about this as we keep going, and we'll get deep into it and talk about training camp and preseason games coming up in August. So we have time on our hands. We'll just keep it. The one thing I do want to talk about was today there was a Fanatics Fans Fest in New York where Odell Beckham Jr. was there. And a fan yelled out, "Have you thought about a return for the Giants?" And he really didn't shy off it. He didn't say this. Said, "I like it." Still there. He made some quick response, basically not saying it was out of the cards. And my thought of this was going back to this is one of the detriments that happened to Daniel Jones. And granted, we're still going to look back at the trade and say it was okay because of Dexter Lawrence came in that deal with the pick that we got from Cleveland. But how do you draft a quarterback 6 that is in question and then throw away your biggest receiving asset at the same time? That to me was, if you thought you were going to pick Daniel Jones, why are you trading Odell Beckham? And I know Beckham had some issues, went on that little boat ride in Miami the week of the playoff game and we get destroyed by Green Bay and all that. But he probably was the most electric wide receiver in his peak as a Giant that we've ever had. Maybe this Malik Neighbors, another LSU boy, can come in there and give us that kind of feel with Beckham. But I kind of would like to see Odell Beckham, if he's got anything left in the tank, to come on and be a third wide receiver on this team. Wide receiver, give him a shot. I think just having the LSU, relationship that they have, having it just to grow out with Neighbors, and he's talked about his fond years, how fond he was with the Giants. There's a rumor if he went into the Hall of Fame that, that he would go in as a Giant, so I don't have a problem if you get him on a low end deal. If we have money left, maybe if someone goes down and one of the receivers goes down, you bring him in if he can contribute. And it looks like as these guys get older, they become a little bit more focused on what they're doing. And maybe he's not going to be the same kind of personality in the locker room. I think maybe he appreciate it. He did make a comment he'd rather had one in New York than LA. So I've always thought, outside of the distractions, but a lot of the veteran Giant fans that I socialize with were happy to see him go. And I just said that I didn't want to see him go because you can't get rid of your best player as a wide receiver when you're building a young quarterback. And that's all I say. And that's why I think now Jackson Dart's in a better position, because instead of building around him, we have a receiving core in place. We'll have a back that we got production with last year to help him. I think that's the way these young quarterbacks need. I think you're never going to find a Patrick Mahomes who can make everybody better. But in the beginning, when you get a guy, you got to kind of surround him with the right people. I think Joe Burrow having T. Higgins and Boyd and the guys he had leading into getting Chase, I think helped Joe Burrow's development. I think you just need these players that are really good around him in the skill positions when you're trying to get a young quarterback going. So we're going to see how that happens. So Sunday night we're watching, and boy was it tough to watch. I had when we were Indiana. Just felt like we had the right spot. We had him at 8. Line went open 8.5, went off at 6. The pressure I felt was on OKC, and you had a situation where only 2 teams have won a Game 7 on the road. It was only the 6th Game 7 in the last 30 years. You had all this stuff leading into what was happening. Felt it was a little bit more. Today's pressure, I think, goes on the favorite much more so than it does the underdog. Felt pretty positive. You see the start, and then the Halliburton injury was just tragic. We've talked about this with my friends. One of my buddies, who's a prominent base basketball guy, it's mentioned to me that shouldn't have even been playing, and that it's really hard to take a kid who's, when you get this opportunity to play in the finals, you don't know how often it comes. We go back to Dan Marino's career, got there in his second year and never got back, and he's probably one of the best quarterbacks ever to play the game. When you have this moment, you got to play through it. We play through injuries, but the branding of what the Pacers have now, the Pacers not only lost Game 7, which everybody thought they would do anyway, but now they lost their best player for another year probably. He might miss all of the next year's season. And then you look at the individual's branding and say he did play hurt. They won a Game 6 with him, but he obviously wasn't the same player. was it really worth it in hindsight when you look back at the injury? I think it's again, you're not going to tell a player who to play or not to play. But in thinking back of what the money's worth to the individual and all that, players in the future should rethink this and say, okay, I know it's a shot to win the title. Maybe we can get back here, build around. But if I'm hurt and a calf injury can lean toward an Achilles, and I was with Jeff on Monday and he brought it up on his podcast, and he had talked to a friend of his that he plays tennis with that is a foot doctor. And he basically said the Achilles next after you have a calf, and that's a danger. I mean, when I stupidly stopped playing soccer, I had strained an Achilles, and I was yelled at by my doctor why I was even moving around on it. Once I had it, and I was 43 years old. So it was, I like playing ball. I love doing this, but, obviously I'm not in any shape compared to a pro athlete, obviously, but it's like still you're looking at it like this guy's got a brand. This guy's got a future ahead of him. Is it worth it for him to play when this is all a possibility? And when I saw the injury and I saw him hit the floor a couple of times, I said, uh-oh, that looked like Achilles, just because, again, we go back to the Greenlaw injury in the Super Bowl, the Kevin Durant injury that he had. When you back off and put your body weight, momentum backwards and lean, and then that foot extends and hits, the heel goes to the ground and hits, that's where the Achilles stretches. And if it's weak, it can pop. And that's what it looked like happened there. And I said, oh, that's it. So now, from a betting standpoint, the first thing you do is you get on a live betting and you lay, 8.5 was a number. The total came down. So you kind of had to find a way to hedge right immediately. At halftime, I thought the game was okay, so you took under. So you kind of build your way out, which is unfortunate way you have to do when you see this. But you felt pretty good even with the game at 1 at halftime. You felt you had a middle too with the line being 6.5. You felt Indiana was doing enough to go. But those couple possessions when they got offense, second chance and a third chance buckets, and Indiana went three minutes without getting a point, it kind of said that this was kind of over. And a buddy of mine called me and predicted that here comes the 10-0 run to start the second half. I'm not in any danger. He had a money line bet on Oklahoma, and I kind of looked at it like, I see what you're talking about. But to me, they were fine until they got beat on those offensive rebounds early in the third quarter. If they had possessed that ball, even if they didn't score, kept it a 1-point game, and they went a couple minutes without scoring, again, the pressure mounts on Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City's hustle, getting to those loose balls, getting to those offensive rebounds, getting a 3 and a 2 and a 2, taking the lead up to 6, calling timeout. You kind of get sense the momentum, crowd getting into it, all that stuff. The hustle plays came out for Oklahoma City early in the third quarter, and that's when that game was over. As far as the Florida Panthers, great series. I really thought the goaltending would make a difference. Felt Edmonton had a chance to win that series. We were wrong. Very impressive domination by Florida in that. I think we really saw the depth in their line and the great goaltending of Bobrovsky. I think recently you could see that happen after game 2. And then when they came out with a blowout win in game 3, you felt like, okay, this was going. Then they get shocked in game 4, go in and dominate game 5 and 6. But you felt like other than game 4, they really were in control of these games. Maybe game 4 they had a lead, 2-goal lead in that. But it's like, you just felt like the Panthers never were in doubt in that series, and the Panthers win in 6 and are changing the way we celebrate these Stanley Cup wins. Or any trophy win. The party's been on since they won. Party, we had a parade Saturday. A lot of fun to watch. We're going to try to figure out what place that we can go see the cup, where it's at down here. So maybe I'll shoot a little video, put it out on Instagram, BIGGUNNER 84 on Instagram, and we could have some fun with that. But it was a great run for the Panthers, 2 in a row, 3 times in the Stanley Cup Finals. Dynasty, I don't know, but maybe if they go back again, you might have to really call it, the latest hockey dynasty. People were talking about that. And as far as OKC goes, I think they're going to be challenged a little bit. I think the league will find a way. Kevin Durant trade to Houston is interesting. I don't know if it's the answer. I think out of the hoopla, that coming out on Sunday was very interesting that they announced that on a big trade of a great player like that on a day of Game 7 of the finals. I think Phoenix got a good enough deal back. I think that they should be happy. Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green. Yeah, I just don't know. You needed that guy for Houston to get over the hump, that individual that can find a shot and score. But I don't know. A 37-year-old guy to give that up, and now you all of a sudden you think Houston's a favorite. I don't see it that way. I was happy the Heat didn't get him, although the Heat offer was really weak. I like that he chose the Heat. I think they fit in. Evidently, I heard Eric Spoelstra and Durant had a good relationship through the Olympics, and I guess they really like each other, so he wanted to come here. Heat evidently gave an embarrassing offer. Told you that they wouldn't give any of their assets. They want to keep building. Just showed you that I think Pat was right on that, not to really go after Durant in that way. I just don't know if you want a 37-year-old player at this point. LeBron's a unique individual. Hasn't had an Achilles like Durant has had. Do we want him? But Durant's numbers say, because of the way the game is being officiated now, for an offensive way, that he might be able to last a little bit longer. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on that. All right, so we're paying attention to the FIFA Club Championship. It was very fun. We had a game down here where the Palmeiras and the Inter Miami club played to a 2-2 tie. Very exciting soccer game. So I'm looking forward to seeing the next rounds. I might go on default, maybe make a pick or two as I watch a little bit more about these teams. But I think it's a very interesting dynamic to lead America into the future of soccer, with next year getting the World Cup and now this World Club Championship. We also have CONCACAF America with the U.S. soccer national team without their full force of players. Most of them, but not all of them, are playing in this tournament, and see how they do and get prepared as we get into the 26th World Cup. And in Major League Baseball today, we're going to go through the list of games and see. We have the Pirates go out with Paul Skeens. Kind of like him today, 2-12 start against Mizorowski for the Brewers. Brewers playing much better ball. Kind of like Skeens in the spot, laying the 105. Nationals blow a 3-0 lead last night. Had him last night, a little bit of a loser. But, Pivetta today, I think Gore got a little lit up against the Dodgers last week. Maybe I like only laying 143 with the Padres. Kind of makes them look like they're a little bit of a side today. Braves going for a sweep against the Mets. I'm going to go against the sweep. Big number here. The Mets are laying 146. I've won 1 in the last 9. Kind of struggling. Bullpen not holding up last night. They got a 3-0 lead in the 6th and lose. We're going to take a shot. Holmes been pitching pretty good against Fuentes for the Braves. We're going to take a shot with the Mets. Cubs and Cardinals. Heard a guy talking about that the Cubs are going to win this series. Cardinals got the first 2. We're going to try to avoid the sweep and go with Boyd today. Dodgers Rockies going to lay a big number, 3-1 in a row, but I don't know how the Dodgers can't beat the Rockies. Yes, they're down 2-0, but come back and win 9-7. Total of 11. Maybe go to the Rockies, the Dodgers team total. Again, to go over. Rockies are a mess. See what happens. The Marlins and the Giants. Webb laying 219 against Cabrera. Cabrera's pitching a little bit better. Marlins get a nice win last night, so now the line's a little bit inflated. I would take a shot with the Marlins again and go grab the 193, small shot, and see what happens. The Red Sox, 407 start against the Angels. Kikuchi against Fitz. Don't really have much here. Red Sox get their ace on the mound. Crochet yesterday, lose a 3-2 game in 10 innings. Angels playing much better baseball. Maybe a small lead to Angels, but Kikuchi's been getting hit a little bit. Rangers and Orioles. DeGrom against Young. Avoiding the sweep. I might like the Rangers today, laying 146. Here's a game we like. A's and Tigers. The Tigers have been struggling. Laying 167. I think it's a low number with Flaherty. Flaherty's been struggling. Tigers haven't been struggling, but Flaherty has been. I'm going to go over 8.5 even money. Say both teams put up runs. Tigers bats were hitting last night. Put up an 11 spot. They look okay. Max Scherzer goes back to the mound against Williams. Kind of like the Guardians, a little bit of the pick 'em today. Rays and Royals, really like the Rays today. That'd be one of the bets, lay 122 with Rasmussen over Waka. Mariners and the Twins, tough game, tough series, been good games throughout. Mariners win a 6-5 game. Kirby and Ryan, good pitching matchup. I'm not going to make a pick. If I have gun to my head, I'm going to take the Twins to avoid a sweep. Diamondbacks and White Sox, Zach Gallen against Burke. You want to avoid the sweep with the White Sox too. Diamondbacks without Carroll. Gallen's been getting knocked around a little bit. Might take a flyer with the White Sox at plus 32 today. Fried and Singer, same exact scenario. Yankees avoid the sweep, laying 201. Singer's good, though. Reds got some little momentum. Had their young star Chase Burns go last night. It looked pretty good early on. Also, the Phillies and the Astros. Phillies lay 142, also on the road with the Astros. So full slate of baseball. Kind of interesting. We gave out a lot more than normally what we do. We just give you a little quick analyzation. You figure out what we like. Three bets I'm going to go as my best bets today. We're going to be the over in the Tigers game as one. I'm going to go the Dodgers on the run line with Yamamoto as two, and I'm going to take the sweep avoider with the Mets over the Braves like 146. So those are the three best bets we have today, and we will talk to you next week with more Giant action. Thanks for listening, and go Big Blue.